4 circles. At 73, Robert Chen had everything a successful man could want. A corner office on the 40th floor, a retirement account that could sustain 3 lifetimes, and the respect of colleagues who called him a legend in corporate finance. Yet as he cleared out his desk on his last day, boxing up decades of achievements, he felt hollow inside, like a bell that had forgotten how to ring. The gold watch they'd given him felt heavy in his palm. 45 years of service, the inscription read. 45 years of what exactly? He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt truly alive at work, truly purposeful. The numbers on spreadsheets had long ago lost their meaning, becoming merely abstractions that generated more abstractions. "So, what's next for the great Robert Chen?" asked Margaret from HR, leaning against his doorframe. "Golf? Travel? Living the dream?" Robert forced a smile, still figuring that out. But the truth was, he had no idea. His wife Sarah had passed 2 years ago, and their children lived across the country, busy with their own lives. The house in Westchester felt like a museum of memories, beautiful but lifeless. 3 weeks into retirement, Robert found himself wandering through Central Park, a daily ritual born of restlessness rather than purpose. It was there he noticed the old Japanese man who came every morning to feed the ducks. The man moved with such deliberate care, each gesture mindful, as if this simple act was the most important thing in the world. One morning, Robert approached him. "You're here every day." The man looked up with eyes that sparkled with quiet joy. "Hi, yes. The ducks, they depend on me. I am Hiroshi." He bowed slightly. "Robert," he gestured toward the pond. "Don't the park services feed them?" Hiroshi smiled. "Yes, but not with love, not with presence. This is my Ikigai, my reason for being." "Feeding ducks is your reason for being?" "Not just feeding, caring, witnessing, being needed." Hiroshi scattered another handful of seeds. "Ikigai is not grand things only. Sometimes it is small things done with great heart." Over the following weeks, Robert found himself joining Hiroshi each morning. Between the gentle sounds of water and wings, Hiroshi shared stories of his life, how he'd come to America as a young engineer, worked for decades in automotive design, raised 3 children, and buried his beloved wife Keiko 5 years ago. "After Keiko died, I was lost," Hiroshi said one misty morning. "I had no Ikigai, I was just existing. Then I remember something my grandmother taught me in Osaka when I was a boy." He drew 4 overlapping circles in the dirt with a stick. "Ikigai lives here." He pointed to the center where all circles met. "What you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, what you can be paid for." Most people find only 1 or 2 circles. True Ikigai is when all 4 come together. Robert stared at the drawing. "I spent 45 years in just 1 circle. What I could be paid for. I was good at it, I suppose, but I never loved it. And I'm not sure the world really needed another financial analyst." "It is never too late to find your Ikigai," Hiroshi said gently. "But first you must listen to your heart. What made you feel alive when you were young?" That question haunted Robert for days. Digging through old boxes in his basement, he found it. A dusty guitar case he hadn't opened in decades. Inside was his college acoustic guitar, the one he'd played in coffee shops and at friends' parties back when music felt like breathing. His fingers, stiff from years of typing, fumbled over the strings. The sound was rusty, painful even, but something stirred in his chest, a flicker of the joy he'd forgotten he possessed. The next week, Robert signed up for guitar lessons at the local community center. His teacher, Emma, was a patient 20-something who didn't seem fazed by his rusty skills. "Why now?" she asked during his 3rd lesson. "I'm trying to find my Ikigai," Robert said, then explained the concept. Emma's eyes lit up. "That's beautiful. You know, we run a music therapy program at the senior center across town. They're always looking for volunteers who can play simple songs. The residents there, music is sometimes the only thing that reaches them." Robert thought of the circles Hiroshi had drawn. What you love. Music was slowly rekindling that flame. What you're good at. Well, he was getting better. What the world needs. Maybe bringing joy to forgotten elders. What you can be paid for. This one didn't seem to matter anymore. A month later, Robert walked nervously into Sunny Meadows Senior Living Center with his guitar case. The activities director, Maria, led him to a room filled with elderly residents in wheelchairs and recliners, some alert, others lost in their own worlds. "This is Robert," Maria announced. "He's going to play some music for us." Robert's hands shook as he tuned his guitar. What if he forgot the chords? What if they didn't like it? Then he remembered Hiroshi's words about presence, about doing small things with great heart. He started with amazing grace, his voice tentative at first, then growing stronger. One by one, he watched faces change. Mrs. Patterson, who Maria said rarely spoke anymore, began humming along. Mr. Rodriguez, confined to a wheelchair after a stroke, tapped his good hand against his armrest. But it was Eleanor who stopped his breath. She was 94, Maria had whispered, hadn't spoken in months due to advancing dementia. Yet as Robert played Moon River, her thin voice joined his. "Moon River, wider than a mile, I'm crossing you in style someday." Tears streaming down his face, Robert continued playing as Eleanor sang every word perfectly, her eyes suddenly clear and present, as if the music had unlocked a door to herself. After that day, Robert returned to Sunny Meadows twice a week. He learned residents' favorite songs, watched music awaken memories, thought lost forever, witnessed families weep as their loved ones sang lullabies they'd hummed to their own children decades ago. "You've found it, haven't you?" Hiroshi asked one morning by the pond. "Your Ikigai." Robert nodded, understanding flooding through him. "It's not just the music. It's the connection, the service, the way I feel most myself when I'm there. I'm good at it because I bring my whole heart, not just my technical skill. And you are needed there." "Yes, Mrs. Chen." "No relation. She waits by the window on Tuesdays and Fridays, watching for me to arrive. Last week she told her daughter that music hour is the best part of her week." Robert smiled. "I finally understand what you meant about doing small things with great heart." 6 months later, Robert had formed a small band of retired volunteers, a former teacher who played harmonica, an ex-librarian on violin, a retired nurse who had a beautiful singing voice. They called themselves the Golden Years Quartet and performed not just at Sunny Meadows, but at several senior centers around the city. The local newspaper ran a story about them. Retirees find new purpose in music therapy. But Robert knew it was more than that. He'd found his Ikigai, that sweet spot where passion meets mission, where personal fulfillment intersects with service to others. One evening, after a particularly moving session where they'd helped a World War II veteran remember and sing his wedding song for the first time in years, Robert called his daughter in California. "Dad, you sound different," Lisa said. "Happy, really happy." "I am," Robert replied, looking at his guitar propped against the wall. "I finally figured out what I'm supposed to be doing with my life." At 73? Especially at 73. All those years, I thought purpose was about achievement, about climbing ladders and accumulating things. But Ikigai isn't about success. It's about significance. It's about finding the place where what you love meets what the world needs. The next morning, Robert met Hiroshi at their usual spot by the pond. The old man was scattering seeds with his characteristic grace, each gesture an act of devotion. "Hiroshi-san," Robert said, using the honorific he'd learned, "I want to thank you." "For what?" "For showing me that purpose doesn't have to be grand to be meaningful. For teaching me that Ikigai isn't something you find. It's something you create, one small act of love at a time." Hiroshi smiled, his weathered face crinkling with joy. "Ikigai is like these circles in the water," he said, pointing to the ripples from a duck diving for food. "It starts small, but it touches everything around it. Your music touches those people. Their happiness touches their families. Their families carry that joy into the world. One small stone, many circles." Robert watched the ripples expand across the pond's surface. Understanding completely, he thought of Eleanor singing Moon River, of Mrs. Chen waiting by her window, of his fellow musicians who discovered their own renewed purpose. All of it had started with a simple question. What made him feel alive? That afternoon at Sunny Meadows, Robert unpacked his guitar and looked out at the assembled residents. Some days were harder than others. The progression of dementia, the inevitable losses, the challenge of reaching minds locked away behind illness. But every time someone tapped their foot, every time a forgotten melody sparked recognition, every time music built a bridge between the past and present, he felt it. Ikigai, his reason for being, not the grand purpose he'd once imagined he needed, but something better, a daily practice of bringing light to dark places, of using his gifts in service of others, of finding profound meaning in moments so small they might seem insignificant to the outside world. As he began to play "What a Wonderful World," Robert smiled, knowing that at 73, his most important work was just beginning. He'd finally learned what Hiroshi had tried to teach him from that first morning by the pond. That Ikigai isn't about finding your one great purpose, it's about choosing, again and again, to show up with love for the world that needs you. And in that choice, in that daily recommitment to service and presence and joy, he'd found not just his reason for being, but his reason for becoming. Every morning brought new circles on the water, new chances to matter, new opportunities to discover that the most profound purpose often lives in the simplest acts of love. The 4 circles had finally aligned, and Robert Chen had found his way home. If this made you pause, think, or feel a little more human, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone on their own journey. Let's build a wiser world, one thought at a time.